Thank you, Bertie. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Vale White Horse Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Catherine Foxhall and I'll be chairing this meeting. We're in Abbey House in Abingdon. Voting members of this committee are here in person as required, and we have, I say, officers in the room. We have officers online, and we have one cabinet member in the room and one cabinet member online, joining remotely. This meeting is being streamed live on YouTube for the public to view and to view afterwards as well. So if anybody who is online could keep your microphones muted, please, while not speaking, that would be really helpful. But please do raise your hand if you'd like to speak at any point, and we'll try and keep an eye on the screen. For those who are in the room, the evacuation procedure, if there's an emergency, is to evacuate through the nearest exit, which is around the corridor to our right, and then please assemble in the car park. If anyone needs a break, there's water in the foyer and there's a toilet out in the foyer as well. And we will have a break after the second item, just for everyone's comfort. Couple of minutes. Please keep mobile phones silent or off unless committee members, that's where you've got your meeting documents. And please don't use your phones during the meeting. At the end of the meeting, we'll confirm that the live stream has ended, and then committee members and people in the room, please sign up on the page as you leave. I don't believe we have any public speakers registered this evening, but just to say this is a meeting in public rather than a public meeting, so that we ask, and this includes staff and colleagues as well, please don't shout out or speak, and we'll invite you to speak. We will keep an eye out and we'll invite you to speak and sure everybody gets their turn. So we have three big items this evening. We have a corporate plan annual performance for 23-24. We have a budget scene setting report, and we have the financial outturn for the 23-24 budget. So welcome everybody. Let's get cracking. So agenda item number 1, Chair's announcements. I don't believe I have any announcements I need to make. Apologies for absence. Candida, do we have any apologies?
Yeah, we have one apology from Councillor James Cox.
Okay.
Yeah, and just so we know, also to note that Councillor Debbie Hallett's online.
Right, brilliant. Other than that, we have everybody in the room. We have Councillor Robert Madison, Councillor Eric Delahart, Councillor Hayden Gascoigne, Councillor Judy Roberts, me. We have our Democratic Services Officer Candida Basilio. We have Councillor Oliver Ford and Councillor Ron Batstow, and Councillor Andy Forsham from Cabinet. Thank you ever so much for joining us. So let's go to item 3, minutes of the last meeting. And as a reminder, the minutes of the last meeting, we primarily discussed Vale White Horse District Council Local Plan Part 2 review. So that wasn't joint local plan, that's our existing local plan Part 2. Does anybody have any corrections or comments to make on the minutes of the previous meeting? If I propose that they are a correct record of the meeting, would somebody like to second? All right, thank you ever so much. I'll sign those at the end and give those to you. Lovely, thank you ever so much. Declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest and non-registrable interest, or any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting this evening? Thank you. Urgent business. I don't have any urgent business that I need to say. Public participation, item 6. We don't have any members of the public registered to speak this evening. So that brings us to item 7, which is work schedule and dates for all scrutiny meetings. Scroll down to my work schedule. So this evening we have budget scene setting, financial outturn and corporate plan. And then our next meeting as well, 4th of November, is another big one. So we have leisure facilities strategy and playing pitch strategy coming to us. That will be Andy Forsham again. And then we have also on 4th of November, review of the new Section 106 affordable housing grant funding application process. This was a document we looked at last year. So it'll be really interesting to see what how that's gone. And then we also have early next year, then in the new year, we'll have corporate plan coming back to us again. And we also have items on the Beacon update report. That's the Beacon action plan, which we looked at earlier in the year. A lessons learned report on decarbonisation projects, and specifically that was about funding and how external funding. Items of interest on community assets and integrated care board partnerships. These stay on our agenda just because they're useful to keep an eye on as much as anything. And then corporate plan performance report again. So we will be one of the items we can look at this evening is to look at whether those reports are as we want them to be. We also have an additional item to go on the work plan, please, called council housing approach. Yeah, and that's an item we've been working up for a while now, and is now with cabinet member and senior colleagues. And that was the item that was raised in joint audit and governance in April. Thank you all about that. And so yes, hopefully we'll be able to have a really good discussion about where our council's going in terms of council housing after taking some opportunities recently to become a landlord again and to purchase some housing. Are there any other items on the work programme that colleagues would like to see or that you have any questions about? As ever, please do let us know if there's anything you'd like to see on there. Which brings us to item. I should know we haven't got any confidential papers this evening, have we?
No. So you'll be on to the corporate plan.
Okay, so that brings us to item 8. Scrutiny committee to consider and note the annual corporate plan annual performance report 2023-2024. We have Councillor Andy Fulsham, cabinet member, in the room, and we have Tim Arouye online. So thank you, Andy. Would you like to introduce your report?
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to be here tonight to bring this to you. It is the annual corporate performance report. Obviously, it's through till March this year, so it seems like a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then. But if you can cast your minds back, it's a snapshot of how it progressed through the year up to that point. It does build on the 4 quarterly reports, so you don't actually have to cast your mind back as far as March. Think of the quarter 4 report that we got and came to this committee in June. You'll see an awful lot of parallels there. Although we could go through line by line, paragraph by paragraph, I actually want to turn the table slightly and ask a question that our chair has hinted at already, which is, what do you actually want to see in these reports? We do get this chance at this point because we're rolling into the new corporate plan. How do you want reporting to be done? What do you want to draw out of these reports? Because the last thing I want to be doing is answering the question that nobody's asking. So what do you love? What do you hate? What do you put up with because it's the best of a bad bunch of ways of saying it? And we'll see what we can do. I can't promise to change everything overnight, but we do have a lot of latitude in our corporate performance reporting. It is something that central government is now paying more attention to. We've had requests for our response on our performance improvement and how we're planning to improve our performance in all sorts of areas. And we've just heard back that the new government's looking into it just as much as the old government was, but with a slightly different cast to it. So we are committed to reporting. It's important for our transparency that we report, but I want to make it legible, understandable for not just our informed members, but our residents, that people can see, well, I know our council, brilliant at recycling, we're one of the top 4 in the country, but want to see where we are with everything else. So do tell me what you want to see in these. I know we've spoken in the past that infographic pages are really useful because it highlights stuff, and it's it's very easy to get a handle on. Do you want more of that? Do you want less of that? The red, amber, green RAG ratings are very useful going through, and it's always nice to see a report with lots of green on it. And the ambers, well, yes, I believe we didn't do a lot of lobbying of central government last year because we could have a hunch at which way it was going, and talking to people that were soon to be in opposition is probably less useful use of our limited resources. But please ask your questions and do tell me what you want to see more of, and we'll see what we can do to deliver it. It won't have to change overnight, but this will evolve as the new corporate plan comes in.
Thank you, Andy. Hey, Derek.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Fulsham. So I am obviously looking through the report, and generally I like the structure of having the summaries at the start. So I imagine that if a resident were to stumble across this report, they would focus on that area, and it's a nice description. So I think that is good that is there. And then, but I also think having the RAG ratings sort of keeps it more honest, right? You've got your targets and you've got to compare to them. So in terms of what we could look at going forward, so for example, in the RAG ratings and the line items, and thinking about the kind of people who aren't experts like we potentially are, is having more links in there. So I'm assuming that this goes onto the website as is, but there's quite a lot of, we forget that there's quite a bit of jargon in there. And so I know that, for example, what the government website is quite good at is like things like that always have links on them. So you could be like, oh, what does that mean? And it might link to a glossary or another page. So I think that sort of stuff, like we forget that people don't necessarily know what S106 is because we use that term all the time. So that would be one thing. And then I also noted that in the reporting measure, quite a few things were narrative report, narrative update, but they weren't linked either. So that was another thing where I was like, okay, I'm sure there is a nice report on this somewhere, but I'm not sure where that is. So if this is uploaded as is, I think there's a few links that could go in there. And then if I may, my final point is a lot of the targets or stated aims as written are not what you would call smart targets. So they say stuff like explore this, review this, but it's not, we've given it green and probably is green as written, but what did we mean by explore? Because explore, I'm sure our officers have done lots of good work, and I'm not doubting that for a second, but explore can mean, quite a spectrum of things. So I think going forward, and it's for you to deem how appropriate it is to have more sort of specific targets. Understand that can be difficult when this is a kind of strategic document, but those were kind of my thoughts when I was looking through it.
I can come back on that. I do like your point. I love the narrative overview, the sort of bird's eye view introduction for each of our main corporate plan themes. I think that is what tells the story very effectively to our residents. And I do share your frustration that so many of our performance targets are narrative reported. I'm an old-fashioned computer person, but in my mind, if you don't measure it, you can't control it. So, to my mind, actually having a measurable target, part of our smart targets that we have referred to many times in recent meetings, and I think I've expressed my love of them and desire to move towards us doing them. Because for one thing, you can't lie with a smart target. You can't say you've succeeded when it's you've missed by a country mile. But it's also very much easier for our officers to report. I'm aware of the huge amount of work that goes into not just the annual performance report, but also the quarterly reporting. And it is important because we need to be able to see which way we're going. But to report on a sort of single line, we've delivered this percentage of affordable homes in the last quarter through housing completions, is much better than our policy is in place and our developers are committed to whatever. I'd rather know we're getting there, we're getting to what we're committed to, or that we've fallen short and therefore we need to focus our attention more onto this area. So yes, I do take your point, and I hope. Well, I know that officers have invested in some tools around delivering more quantitative reporting rather than just qualitative and narrative. So
Yeah. And if I may, then actually you kind of hit on another point that I didn't quite make, which is what the impact is, because quite a lot of these are like developed this policy, but it's like that's all well and good, but is it working in practice? Which you kind of actually touched on. Yeah.
I think that actually relates to your first point, which is having click-throughs and links through from this report and, for that matter, our quarterly reporting. I think that's a very good thing, because our major initiatives, like our work on climate emergency, have major reports behind them. But why write the same report in a condensed form for this when you could actually have a summary in this and chapter and verse, which some of our residents do genuinely want to dive through and get the details on, and so they should. And interlinking the references it's second nature. It's what I do it in the day job, so there is no reason why we shouldn't do it here. And I know that the officer team are keen to see that come in. Again, it's going to take time. I don't think first report of new corporate plan will see completely different, but we'll see it evolving over the months. So we're getting to more approachable, more usable reporting. Hopefully it doesn't land as such a major work component for the officer team as well.
Eric.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Andy. I was missing the infographic on the front page. I don't know if that was this report last year had that, or if it's a different report. But the sort of headline items like third in the country for recycling was sort of big and bold, and there's a little picture of them. So on the first page, we should highlight the things we really want to say. This is why we're proud of this report. Was that in last, or am I thinking of a different?
I think I've actually got that sort of infographic in front of me. It's actually in the quarterly reports.
Yes.
And I find it really useful. It's actually the first page I look at because it summarises a snapshot of everything that's happening. We haven't. I don't actually have last year's annual report in front of me, but and you're right. It isn't there in this report. I think here we were looking much more at summarising everything and making sure that comes through. But yes, I take your point, and I actually find that an infographic a good way of expressing things.
Yeah. I had one other point, maybe the RAG ratings. I also think that it would be nice to see whether that's changed since the last report. So it was red and now it's orange. It'd be nice if that square sort of a diagonal through it or an arrow or something, just say this has changed since last year.
It's an interesting concept. I'd have to go back to officers and ask if that was possible, but I do like to see trends. But certainly in the times I spent on joint audit and governance, I was always after, well, what's the trend? Where have we moved on in the period that we're looking at? Is it an improving picture? Is it a declining picture? Is it a steady state? Because direction of travel is often more of the story than the actual final result. So, I like the thought, but I'll have to talk to the team and see what they can deliver that actually keeps it readable, understandable, but showing where we're heading. I think is a really helpful thought. Thank you.
Andy, Tim and his beautiful rural idyllic landscape have popped up behind you there. So, Tim, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, hi committee. Yeah, just to follow up that point, and Councillor Folsom was absolutely right. It is something that we're actually talking about doing in terms of just showing the direction of how things are performing, whether that's upwards, downwards, or staying the same. So it is something that we're looking at doing in the next iteration. But yeah, welcome that coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
I'm going to go to Debbie online and then Ron after Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me and see me?
Yes.
We can.
Yes, excellent. New kit, it's wonderful. Thank you for that that presentation or introduction, Andy. Although it's understandable why we would want to look ahead to the features of our new reporting, I wasn't prepared to discuss that tonight. I didn't understand that was part of our agenda item, so I haven't really taken a look or thought about that. I'm sorry. But what I did do was try to figure out where we are in the reporting cycle, because I'm concerned that the delay in the production of the next corporate plan is going to affect the budget setting process, which we just were briefed on. It looks like the corporate plan will not be ready in time for the budget cycle. So I'm concerned about that. And I'm also not clear that I understand. So this is a year-end, an annual report, and that is for the year up to the end of March this year, sorry.
Yes.
So according to my figures, we have in this corporate plan cycle, 2 more reporting cycles, 2 more quarterly reports to come before we're finished. Is that right? Because it finishes in October. So, I mean, we're ending it. It's ending virtually this month, and we have the 2 reporting cycles to come. Have I got that? He's nodding, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I looked at particularly the items that are listed as amber in the tables. I have to admit I didn't read the text. Haley likes it, and I can see why some people would really like that. But I sort of cut to the chase and went to the graphs. The items that were yellow, I'm wondering whether they shouldn't be actually red, or whether we need more of an explanation as to why they're still not yellow. Sorry, amber. Why they're still amber, that we consider those to be finishable in the plan period, because that was what I understood. It would be red if we don't anticipate being able to successfully complete that project. It would be amber if we are delayed, but we do expect to finish it in the next 2 cycles, which would mean that it's actually finishing right now. So my question is, that's a long way to introduce it. If you look at the report down on the pages, page 42 is where I saw several of them having to do with the SIPA upgrades, the finance system. And the explanations on the amber ones are lack of capacity, meaning that things haven't been done. And those are the ones that I was concerned actually probably should be red. What do you think about that?
Just give me 2 seconds.
It's page 42 of the document pack, or page 33 of your call. Top of theme
42
4.
of the report. Yeah. Okay. Page 51.
I see it's page 3.
Yeah.
Page 33 of the performance report, but 42 of our document.
Oh, sorry.
pack.
Yeah, page numbers. Is it theme number 4 in the graph section? So I think it was page 33. Mine says 52.
To an extent, I don't want to comment in detail on changes within Head of Finance's team, but
Okay, I understand that, but on an overall view of red versus yellow, did I understand what those colors represent? That anything that's yellow is anticipated to be complete within the reporting period. Sorry, yellow, amber. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I get your meaning. I think it's that we don't anticipate a block within it. I can't promise that they will be all completed within this period, but we can see there will have been substantial work towards completing them. And I think Simon Hewings would like to come in, and I'll bow to his expertise on that.
I mean, certainly
Yes,
in the context of me filling in those returns, I mean, that we are progressing those activities, but probably not to the timeline we would have wanted to, which is why, you know, my interpretation was amber. If that's incorrect, then I do apologise. But that, I think in my head, red would be there's a fundamental problem that means this isn't going to happen. I think amber is, in my head, is we will get there. It was just probably taking a bit longer than we wanted to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was going off the definitions that are within the report on a previous page, page 4 of the report. So maybe we need to tighten that up. But I applaud your intentions to make measurements more quantifiable. When we did this plan, it was the first such plan we'd attempted, and we found quickly we didn't have the capacity or the resources to do very much measurement at all, which is why so many narrative progress reports are in there. So I look forward to seeing what's going to come out of this next one in terms of actual quantifiable measurements, and also the difficult request that you've just heard to show the change over time in the targets. So it's really good. Could you for a couple of minutes speak to the problem that we have of this being late and how it's going to impact our budgeting?
Certainly, I'm happy to address that. I'm sure you, the committee, will remember that part of the trade-off that we did with accelerating the accelerated timetable for submission of the joint local plan was that for sheer officer capacity, we needed to delay some of the work. We actually borrowed some staff off corporate plan work to put on the joint local plan to ensure that we were able to meet the Secretary of State's request for producing a plan with all haste. And so we moved on that as fast as we could, but we had to accept that we wouldn't be able to bring the new corporate plan forward as fast as we would wish. I don't believe we'll suffer from that. I'm assured by officers that it will be ready in time to feed into the budget setting process. As those of us who are here for Simon Hewing's presentation just before this meeting heard, we're actually ahead of where we've been in previous years in the budget setting process, because we've had briefings now rather than later in the year. So I think we're in a good position. Yes, I would have loved to have brought the corporate plan forward to this committee and to council sooner, but for a trade-off, it was one that I thought it was worth taking. I also want to fill in, going back a point on the reporting tools, and I appreciate Councillor Hallett's explanation of the reporting model that we took back from 2019 onwards, and I know that officers have done quite a major piece of work to source some software to allow proper deep dive business intelligence tools. The tool in particular, in this particular case, is Power BI, to do a lot more structured reporting, which will allow us to do more quantitative storytelling from our internal systems without requiring a lot of additional officer time to go and extract and
that's good to hear. It's been a real manual effort for years, I know, and a lot of people spend a lot of hours doing this. So Councillor Andy, you say that the corporate plan is going to be delivered in time to inform the budget setting process, but it looks like on our work program we have it coming on the 28th of January. So I don't see how that can work out. Maybe Tim can explain, or Simon or somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Tim, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So in terms of with the as Andy has actually explained, with the moves that we had to make in terms of the effort that needed to be diverted elsewhere, working on the joint local plan, it did mean that resources were moved. However, what we are using is the opportunity to now work alongside, so we're actually working in parallel with the budget setting process in terms of what we were doing to bring the corporate plan forward. So by the time it comes around to next year for January, to come back to this scrutiny committee, and for February, that's where we're aiming to bring the new corporate plans at that point. So it will be aligned. So we're doing it in parallel. And just wanted to touch on the other point that we're making in terms of to try and make the new sort of the targets and the measures in there a lot more quantifiable. That is something that we're also doing some work on in the background, where we're actually talking to a lot of the other areas and service areas and the teams, and actually talking and gleaning more of the data and the insights that they have, which will then inform the other software that Andy's also just talked about as well, in terms of what will to be able to get good data out. It's always that you have to have the good data in to get the good measurements. So that's the sort of stuff that we're actually speaking to all of our teams a lot more about. So there should be less of the narrative updates. Yes, we'll be able to give, I suppose, a summary and a high level evaluation at some point, but to be able to then see the actual trends and how things move, it's about the right data that needs to go in to inform that. And that's what we're working on. Hope that.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, thank you, Tim. I do just take chair's privilege, I'm afraid, just to pick up on one of Debbie's other points that she made and that you've made earlier about the amber ratings for lobbying activities, because the report does say that it was a lack of capacity within the team, whereas earlier this evening you said it wasn't worth lobbying an outgoing government. Demonstrably, that suggests that it is worth lobbying a new government, but if there's not capacity in the team, that's not going to be possible. So I just wondered where.
Well, I can give you some insights, kind of hot off the press, that actually the corporate policy and transformation teams, we're now looking at it being up to full strength. We have the capacity to bring forward a lot of this work, which we weren't able to do, bearing in mind other pressures on the officer team. So I'm not going to say we're lavish with officer resources. I believe we are adequately equipped with officer resources to bring these things through.
Great. Thank you very much. Rob, did you?
Yes, just a specific topic, I think, on the original introductory part. It's actually following on from what Hayley said. When I was looking through it, I saw that the Housing Delivery Strategy Action Plan had been was scheduled to go to cabinet, so I wondered whether it was achieved or not, and indeed it was. So that was a positive, but it would be very nice, particularly in that original section, just to highlight that plan and to link back to the document actually, which is available publicly, yes, but it's quite difficult to access, I think. I mean, I found it by typing in housing delivery strategy and it came up, so it was very good. But
indeed, you make a very good point, Ron. That linking of reports makes a lot of difference, and I was very pleased. Although housing delivery action plan was not something that I was touching on in my cabinet responsibility, it was one that I'm very proud of. This whole council that we got that on the books and delivered. And
well, being proud of it, it'd be nice if it was more visible, I think.
Oh, I agree.
World.
Thank you, Ron. Judy.
Yeah, I've got a few points. One, although this is a report for just this year, basically since the corporate plan that's been running over quite a long period of time, from up to 2019,
yes,
onwards. So there's quite a few things in there which we desperately wanted to get done in 2019, which we've actually completed. And it's very difficult with just the rag rating green. I was thinking there should be a completed. Sometimes they can be rolled over. And certainly one of the things that you can quantify probably at this point, there were an awful lot of things we wanted to do. And we were told, well, you haven't got a policy. So we didn't even have a policy to link things to. So we had to write a policy, and then you had to write a strategy off the back of the policy, and then you could have an action plan. Well, hopefully by the time you get to your corporate plan, we will be linking policy ticks, strategy ticks, action plan now, KPIs on action plan, and therefore it should be much more easy to make it quantitative. that's my hope, and that's the sort of thing. But I certainly think that with things, particular things, you've got comments about Oxplan 2050. Now, as it turns out, things might start moving, but it will never be called Oxplan 2050 again. And the growth deal is in there, you know. So I think with things like that, it is a 4-year rolling plan.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have to come think about that when it's written as to whether that particular thing can be finished and have a black or white or, I don't know, whatever colour gold.
Yeah.
Something separate that says, yes, that was finished, that was rolled up, that was ended. So that it's clear when you're running through as a member of the public.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to go, what are you talking about the growth deal for? You know, it's so, yeah, it's difficult. So that was that point. A lot of the things that we do as day-to-day work aren't in this because that isn't part of our corporate, but they are in the data hub.
Yes.
And I think there should be a link saying if you're looking for things like waste clearance or all, you know, those sort of things.
Planning performance.
I'm sure you can come up with a generic term of day-to-day work, but you know, there is a separate document.
Yes.
That details how progress on all of those, and actually sometimes that's probably more pertinent than going through the corporate plan. So I would like to see on the website the two sitting, at least a link to the other one saying, you know, these are ordinary outcomes, these are plan outcomes.
Yeah.
And then the third one was on page 37. Yes, page 37, BHC 1.1. Interestingly, this is the one that's been on the rolling plan at the bottom, and it says that it's under a strategic property review. This is the review of the use of community buildings and other facilities owned and managed by the council to maximise its uses. And this is an area where some of our buildings are really well highlighted, but some of the older ones aren't. And it's a big property portfolio, and I know we had to start from scratch because it didn't come back in-house when the whole thing stopped, or at least there was no information that came back. So the strategic property review, it would be nice to know when that was coming through, because it is, say, it's amber, so that it could then be linked in with our rolling programme to look at it as part of the community-owned things. So
I feel like you're suggesting everything needs some kind of little timeline to tell us when it's supposed to have happened, when it did happen, and when it will happen, so everyone can see where we are.
I think it's all very well having annual reports and quarter reports, and that's good. But I do think it also needs to have an extra bit about this is a 4-year rolling plan, this is where we started, and this is where we got to in those 4 years. And I mean, clearly COVID didn't help things. But, you know, I think that would be helpful, because when I looked through it, I suddenly thought, my God, this is all the stuff that we did right at the beginning. And so, yes, I think we need in the next iteration some way of delineating how all that links together and what's gone out the door and regarded as a success and what's still being worked on. So yes, I don't know, your idea might be what we need, but I need something to tell me where we were on our road, and just green could have meant finished and never going to go back, could have meant we progressed quite well. This section could have meant progress quite well during the period of time of the annual report, and I couldn't tell without reading masses.
Thank you. You brought quite a few items there. Forgive me and remind me if I miss any, but I know the spreadsheets that underlie the reporting do often have completion dates on and say achievement with this, and actually that relates very much to your point about that it refers to Oxplan 2050 or growth deal, whatever. Quite often the finished summary will be written, but written in the terms that are current at that point. So stuff that referred to Oxplan 2050 refers to Oxplan 2050, despite the fact that we know that work stream is no longer continuing. But it was there when that particular work have finished, and so the report clearly referenced that. So I know the data is there in the finished dates, and there must be ways that we can put that in as at least footnotes or explanation to say when. The last thing I ever want to see in any plan is seeing
I think we need to somehow delineate the different timescales that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So per quarter, per year, per 4-year rolling plan.
It's not a rolling
It's got to
progression
be
of things
something there
delivering.
that tells you where you are on that journey.
I agree. But the other thing that I want to refer back to is that actually gives me a chance to give credit to those that came before me in this role, building the whole corporate plan, the existing corporate plan, but also the reporting structure and because you're starting from a completely greenfield site and sort of no idea what was going to come. And I feel very much like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, because without that we'd still be sort of doing a sort of scattergun approach to getting things done, which wouldn't be productive. So thank you to those that came before me. And that's not just individual cabinet members, but the whole cabinet.
Andrew, this is nice. I am also conscious of the people who've got to come after you this evening.
Yeah.
This is lovely.
So yeah, my thanks to express.
Sense of chronology, I think, is where we're heading for.
Yeah.
Have any of the other committee members got other suggestions? Robert?
Yeah, I've got one last one. Thanks, Chair. I've got two things. First is a bit of feedback, and second is a question. The bit of feedback is on our table with the red, amber, green ratings. There are only comments on amber or red ratings.
Yeah.
For me personally, I probably would find it useful to have comments also made on green ratings if there is anything noteworthy. Just to pluck an example out of nowhere, just to illustrate, let's say that in order to achieve a green rating, you've moved 2 or 3 team members off of whatever project, resulting in that being amber onto this that makes that green. I just think having that context in the table, I would find that useful just to get a little bit more of a view of the context and the balance of things. That was my little bit of feedback. My second bit is a question. There are 2 or 3 amber ratings falling under the remit of head of policy and programs. They have comments making reference to vacancies and capacity in the teams. My question basically is, in order to achieve the many green ratings also falling within the head of policy and programs remit, have officers working in these teams been overstretched or overworked?
I can give you some more context on it. I did hint on it in a previous answer. We were having difficulty recruiting into that team. We are now up to full capacity on. It's actually we've merged the corporate programs and the transformation team, so we've actually got a bigger stock of programs officers that were able to deliver transformation and corporate policy throughout the organisation. So it's kind of one bigger team that's actually able to flex and deliver wherever's most appropriate.
Adriana, did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. Good evening. I was just going to say exactly what Andy said, that the issues within the team were due to vacancies that we had. And as Councillor Forsham and Tim mentioned earlier, those vacancies have now been filled. I think that's the only staffing matter that's appropriate to say tonight at Scrutiny Committee.
Yes, point taken. Thank you ever so much, Adriana. Right, I'm going to give the last comment then or suggestion to Oliver.
Well, mine's a bit of a question, really. It takes into account listening to the different comments from our colleagues on this committee and Councillor Forsham. Are we absolutely 100% clear who this report is laser-like aimed at? In the sense that I'm beginning to hear quite different views in terms of detail, and presentation about who that audience might be?
That's a very good question, Oliver. And my first and foremost thought on it is that this is a document for our residents, including actually our staff members, who many of whom are our residents as well. So we need to be transparent, but also accessible. But I also acknowledge that there's a lot of desire amongst members and also our residents who are, in many cases, subject policy experts who would want to dive into the detail. So it is a balancing act to keep between reporting in a manner that the man on the number 53 bus can pick up and say, right, I know what my council is doing. And those who, well, they've got a postgraduate qualification in climate change and adaptations, and want to know what we're doing on that. And in some ways, we've got to address both audiences. So it is tricky.
I wonder, in that case, whether, given the very good points that have been made about linking through to other documents, whether it might be in the future worth looking at actually having a more compact document as the front-facing document, so that it's accessible to non-experts, but also to have the information behind it that will inform experts and indeed, you know, even subject expert residents, and things like that. But what I don't think we want to do is to pile a lot of detail into this document, because otherwise it will become inaccessible.
Thank you. I can confirm that this does echo a lot of the discussions that we've had internally about reporting. I think there is a desire to see a slimmed down, more accessible report, but I don't want to ever be in a position of seeming to hide performance detail from our residents. So yeah, keeping that linkability and accessibility together is a key thought in the way I've been working on this.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Andy. So we were asked, or we were invited to consider and note the annual report. I think we've considered and noted it. But thank you also, Andy, for your invitation for us to tell you what we think and what needs to change, which I think we also have done. I've got a whole list of comments here. I'm sure Candida's made lots of notes, and no doubt you will take them away and think about them. But some of the key points I think that have come up in the discussion then is a reduction in jargon. To really think about, and this combines kind of the early part of the discussion and the last bit, is really kind of think about how we make links from the overview in this document through to the more detailed policies, and to really think about how we use narrative updates to understand what has been achieved. Okay, so you've made a nice thing. What is the impact? You know, you and I both, we've been in an academic context. If you can't demonstrate the impact of the nice thing that you've created, then it doesn't exist as far as, you know, people are concerned. We've talked a lot about smart targets. That was a council motion, so I know that there's lots of work, and I know from cabinet discussion that was going on as well. Infographics, to think about how we use RAG ratings, and I think the comments about also commenting on green ratings. I wonder if that could also be used to address the kind of things that Councillor Roberts has been talking about. Okay, so this is green. Has it been green since 2019 and not changed? Or is it just green after being amber for 3 years? You know, is this a real success story that has to be done? I note also from Councillor Hallett's comments that we do have 2 more quarterly reports to come to wrap up this corporate plan cycle, so we'll look forward to those. And to think about, yeah, who is this report aimed at? Who are we talking to? And it might well be that the initial report contains links to a whole, it's the just TARDIS, which takes us to a whole other world of council data, which would be lovely. And is there anything that we've missed or? Okay, so good luck. Thank you forward. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Certainly.
I just think, Chair, as well, that you know, I think it has been said that we should congratulate the people who've worked so hard to produce what is an excellent and rather literate report. Actually, I didn't pick up one split infinitive, which is always makes me extremely happy.
Always nice.
So yes, thank you everybody for your work, and no doubt work continuing officers coming as we transition to a new corporate plan. But yes, and all those who came. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and I will move us swiftly on to the budget scene setting item number 9 in our pack this evening. So the Scrutiny Committee are to consider this report for noting, but before we start on discussion, I do want to note a comment that was made to us in our briefing, but also to the full council have had a briefing on the budget setting already this evening, that this is the first time that we've brought this kind of report so early in the process. So I think that's a real positive. That's something that certainly the Scrutiny Committee, I remember we wanted to see last year, and I know that officers have been keen. And I think all members recognise that it gives us more of an opportunity as members to be involved, rather than a kind of mad scramble in the new year to try and think, is there anything we'd like to see change? So thank you ever so much, and particularly Simon, to you and your team for making sure that happened. So we've got Simon Hewings, our head of finance, online. We also have Anna Winship from the finance team, and Andy Crawford. Do we have our cabinet member online as well?
We do.
All right. Disappointing, obviously, not to have you in the room, Andy, but thank you for joining us on. Committee, are there comments you'd like to make on the budget scene setting report that we have before us?
It's a very good report, and yes, I'm pleased to see it. Paragraph 18, the member challenge for the capital programme will take place through October and November 2024. What are you envisaging the member challenge is actually going to be?
I can pick that one up. I mean, basically, what we've done historically is gone through each project line by line, made sure that we have that the project remains valid in the context of the council's corporate priorities, tested that the cost of that project, is still as it's expected to be. Obviously, quite a pertinent issue at a period of high inflation. But I think possibly the most important thing of all is make sure that we've got the profiling right, that expectations are realistic of when the project will come forward, that resourcing is in place to deliver that project, and that the project will be delivered as originally specified.
Thank you. So I just realised that I went enthusiastically into questions and didn't give Councillor Crawford a chance to introduce this lovely report, and no doubt note the comments that I made as well. So Andy, if there's anything you'd like to say, please do.
Yeah, as I'm not in the room, I think Simon will maybe give a brief summary to both this and the next item. I'm here to butt in and answer any easy questions that people might have.
Well, I would say you're here to ask the difficult questions. That's would you
like me to say a few words?
Yeah, please do. Yes,
that's fine. I mean, you actually stole my first sentence, which is the first time. This is the first time we brought this report, so I'll be a bit briefer. Basically, the report outlines, in summary, the sort of timetable and key themes that will be involved for both revenue and capital budget setting, which are activities that are already underway. In terms of revenue, we're expecting some challenges, but the extent of those challenges remains unclear, whilst we have no certainty over future local government funding from government and other decisions such as what council tax referendum levels will be. Those challenges may increase in future years, but in particular on revenue, I'm hoping the report gives a sort of flavour or an indication of the sort of number and variety of moving parts that are involved in sort of trying to bring together a budget that will have to be considered while we sort of bring the numbers together. In terms of capital, we're looking at repeating a lot of the work that we did last year on the budget challenge, which actually follows in neatly to the question that we just answered. And primarily around making sure that the profiling profiling is correct, and that we are fully aware of and understand what our financing profile is to fund all that work and what implications that has.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Ron, for your first question. Does anybody else have a second question? I will ask one then, and I noticed Councillor Forsham has snuck out of the room very quickly, so this will go to Andy Crawford. I was a little bit concerned, page 56, paragraph 9, where we talk about including reducing expenditure to focus on confirmed priorities, although the new corporate plan may offer an opportunity to for further expenditure reductions. And I know in our meetings before, Scrutiny Committee some of us did raise concerns that the proposals for the new corporate plan appeared thinner than the previous corporate plan. So I just wondered whether the process of developing the corporate plan is also, and the concern that we may have to make costs, cut savings, whether the development of the new corporate plan is being done with an eye to cutting costs. If you have fewer priorities, you have fewer things to spend money on.
Having been sort of along with the journey of the development of the corporate plan, I don't think that was ever something that was specifically considered, and I don't think that the fact that it is more focused now perhaps is a reflection on that. I don't believe it was written. Obviously, we wouldn't be writing a corporate plan that was unachievable financially, but that's a different question, isn't it? So it's not as if there was some cunning plan to reduce the ambitions of the council simply to save money, and we drop this and that because of it.
Right. Okay.
At least not I'm aware of.
Not those. You weren't included in that conversation. Debbie, online, you have a question.
Thank you. Yes. At the risk of banging the same drum, I'm quite concerned that this budget process is proceeding apace. I'm not concerned about that. Congratulations on that. And it's very good to have this report here in Scrutiny. But in order to determine what cuts and what services need to be cut back and that kind of thing, it seems to me you need the guidance of the Vale's Council's priorities, and we're not going to have that for a couple more months. So can you reassure me that this budget is actually going to reflect the values and the political decision making that the council has in mind when we don't have a plan in place? And then I have one other question.
I guess it is difficult timing, and I think Andy at the previous item has explained why the resources were moved from the corporate plan to the joint local plan. We clearly do have a local plan in place, so we do have a corporate plan in place at the moment still, and we have, to use joint local plan parlance, perhaps we have an emerging corporate plan for the future. And I appreciate it, clearly won't have gone through all the necessary hoops until January. But the budget setting will hopefully reflect the expected corporate plan that we have been developing, and which we expect to go through in due course. You're right, Debbie. It's not ideal, but it's where we are.
All right. So you had eyes on this corporate plan. You've had eyes on it. Oh, right.
So
okay.
I've seen it.
That's
in
good.
Development. Yeah.
That's good. Good. Okay. Thank you. This corporate plan the current one expires in October 24, which is this month. So from then on, we do not have one in place. So that's good that everybody's paying attention to that. I appreciate and understand the capacity and resourcing problems we had, and how decisions had to be made to advance the joint local plan at the cost of other things, one of which is the corporate plan, and I don't know what other things suffered as well. But it's a resourcing problem that we're all aware of, and it speaks for itself. My other question has to do with transformation. You mentioned in I'm going to go over here now, and I'm going to read paragraph 9, but also paragraph 5. In paragraph 5, there's just a bullet point. All of these other income events are well defined and well discussed elsewhere, and I feel like I understand them. I haven't seen the details of a transformation program that is estimated to save 100,000 per year. And did I read somewhere that we expect it to save 200,000 next year? So that's one question. And then in paragraph 9, the transformation effort is to maximize savings and change how council delivers its services. How does that specifically? How is that affecting the budget setting process? Because I don't see very much information about income generated from transformation programs. Thank you.
So it was £100,000 per annum cumulatively. So which means that this year it's 100,000 and next year it's an extra 100,000 on top of the first 100,000. If that makes sense, that explains, hopefully explains the numbers. It's not it's not really based on the hope and expectation that we'll increase income, but we'll better do things mostly do things in a more efficient way that will allow us to make cost savings rather than generating income. You're right that what you haven't got in front of you at the moment is details of where those savings are specifically. Whether or not Simon could produce something that gives a little bit more detail on that, I maybe would defer to him.
It's probably not appropriate at this point. Actually, my question is just kind of strategic, and I'm looking for that in the future. And it's not tonight. This is an overview of what you're doing, and I appreciate that. Okay. But basically, you can be kind of forewarned that I'm trying to find out about this transformation program, and I can't seem to find very much information about it. Not in the budgets and not on the website. So I'm concerned. And there was someplace else where we approve an extra expenditure or £100,000 into the budget to pay for transformation work, which basically offsets the savings for the first year. So I'm concerned about that, and I don't know who to ask besides you, Simon, and Andy, because I don't know really who's in charge of that. As the officer corps, who's in charge of transformation? I don't know.
Simon, did you want to come back on that one? Because I think there might have been a briefing recently on transformation.
I mean, certainly transformation, and that transformation update came to Scrutiny Committee over the summer, I think it was, wasn't it?
It came to joint scrutiny, yeah.
It came to joint scrutiny, sorry.
Yes, obviously I wouldn't have seen it.
Oh, okay. So it has been brought through there. I mean, certainly from
I'll look there.
From a perspective of budget setting, I mean, we're in touch with the transformation team. Because we've acknowledged that the question you're asking, Debbie, where is the plan and where's the number coming from, when's it going to hit? So that is something we are working on with the transformation team.
Okay, thank you. Let's move. Let's come back to the report. Do committee members have comments on other items in the report? Judy.
Yes, I'm just trying to find the last comment, but I can't find it. On bullet point 2 in 9, it says finalise the challenge of and deletion of vacant posts across the council, several of which have been held to help achieve the vacancy factor. Reading that makes it sound like, because I think somewhere else it said that we have a percentage vacant post being held to make the budget meet. It makes it sound like you've held a post that nobody's going to fill, just so that you can tick the box of the vacant post quota. I'm assuming that's not right, or that we are now tidying that up and it won't be going forward.
I'll try to answer this. I guess where there is, for example, somebody leaves the post and then it becomes vacant. It's an HR issue, and it's not something that it's something for the head of service, or sorry, the chief executive to determine with SMT. If it's not essential that post is filled, there needs to be some work to decide whether or not that post can be deleted based on change over the years. I wouldn't necessarily it's been held to purely held closed to help achieve a vacancy factor, but it certainly has helped to achieve a vacancy factor because of that decision. Where we've got vacant posts that have existed for some time, and the sky hasn't fallen in, clearly it makes absolute sense to really make sure that we need to fill it or whether we can
yeah.
whether
I
we
agree
can
with that.
whether we can achieve our aims as a council by not filling it.
Yeah, I just felt that the wording was possibly a little bit open and too transparent.
Yeah, no,
That's
I
not
understand.
what you
It's a
wanted to tell me.
misspeak, I think.
Yeah.
My second point was, it says the work to review base budgets will be completed by the 15th of September. Was that right?
That's internally amongst officers. I think that was done, wasn't it, Simon?
We're just a little bit behind on that. I think we're probably a couple of weeks behind, so we're starting to look at the output of that. What I would say is we have started the base budget challenge exercise on time, which has started. The first one was today, so we are in terms of some of that's probably going to make up some time, because obviously we're potentially challenging budgets that some of them aren't fully complete. But you know, if I compare that to previous years, we're still probably a month plus ahead of where we were 12 months ago in terms of, you know, progress on the base budget.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was a bit optimistic. But anyway, good news to hear that it's rolling. And I did have another, but I can't find the page. I'll come back to it soon.
If I may, I'd like to ask about paragraph 20, where you talk about developing an approach to borrowing. I just wondered if you could please explain a little bit more to us about for what and when we might need to start borrowing, and whether that's something we need to be concerned about.
Obviously, there are the council's sitting on quite a lot of cash, which isn't we're effectively holding in trust to a certain extent, I suppose, and that is what's generating a lot of the treasury income. That is often paid out at a time where we don't know it's going to be paid out. For example, earlier in the year, the county council suddenly decided that they had finished the number of primary schools that were funded through Section 106 monies that we had been sitting on, and I authorised the release of about £10 million to the county council in the space of a few weeks. So that meant our cash pile, if you went down, and obviously the treasury income coming from that likewise went down. Where we have expenditure, capital expenditure that can effectively be internally funded by cash, and you know that's often the cheapest way to do it. We haven't yet had a need to go out to the market in any way to borrow. So the review that's effectively being undertaken is to understand the extent to which we might need to go to physically borrow in the market, be it through the public sector or otherwise. I frankly would hope that doesn't happen in the very near future, but it would be wrong of us not to review whether or not we might need to do it.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you ever so much. Debbie, did you still have your hand up from previously, or did you want to ask another question?
Clearly, a historic hand, Chair.
I think it's a solution. I'm going to move us on. Do committee have other questions they wish to ask on this report? Are there any other comments? We're obviously we're being asked to note this report, and thank you both very much, and to your teams for doing this work and for doing it earlier in the process. I think we'll see the benefits of it over the next few months as the groups have a chance to think about what they would like to see. Committee, are there other recommendations or comments that we'd like to put on the record in terms of making recommendations to Cabinet or comments?
One of the reasons I wanted to move the budget setting earlier was to keep track of the things that were in the budget and whether we were running into trouble on. There's several projects that seem great in March. By the time you get to September, you realise they're going to really struggle to be delivered out the door at that time. It would have been nice if I could find those easily to distinguish the ones that are, if you like, amber or red in terms of their completion, rather than, because there's several things that go into the budget every year that are either based on the corporate plan, and some of them are more difficult to try and achieve in the time that you have for the budget. Am I making
Is
myself
that
clear?
the next item, financial outturn?
Maybe. I'll shut up.
Should we come back to that?
I was looking puzzled, so I'll shut up.
I think Anna, we'll leave that one for you, and we'll come back to you on that one, Simon, on the next item. Okay, so I think we're going to note your report and thank you for your report, and we'll look forward to seeing more of this budget process emerging over the next couple of months. So yes, thank you ever so much to everyone involved. Great, thank you. I guess you'll all be back on again in 2 minutes, but let's just have a couple of minutes break. I make it 11 minutes past 8 on my computer, so let's regroup at 8:15 financial outturn. If we could stop the...
No, what we'll do, I'll mute it.
We'll just mute it. Okay, yeah. So we'll stay on screen, but we'll just mute it a few minutes. Okay. Thank you, Bertie. Okay, welcome back to this Vale of Whitehall scrutiny meeting, where we have a final item, which is item 9 or 10. This evening.
10.
Item 10. Our financial outturn report from 2023-2024. Councillor Crawford's got a very nice snake plant that's going to talk to us. So, Simon or Anna, would you like to make any comments about this report?
Yeah.
And then if Councillor Crawford returns, we can ask him to introduce it as well.
Yeah, I'll very briefly introduce it. The first thing I'm going to say is Anna is going to hopefully answer most of the questions and give my voice a break for this item. She's got the detail. But I mean, in summary, the revenue outturn for 23-24 is summarised on table 1 on page 60, and there's more breakdown in table 3 and in subsequent paragraphs on a number of the variances. The capital outturn is summarised in table 5 on page 64, and again the subsequent paragraphs give detail. The overarching headlines for both revenue and capital is we came in under budget, so clearly in terms of revenue that's good news. In terms of capital, that reflects in many ways that reflects slippage of projects, but what I would say is I think our rate of expenditure against budget on capital is actually far greater than it ever has been here, in part because of all the work we put in on last year's capital budget challenge, trying to get the profiling right. Clearly we've still got a long way to go, but I think we're a lot better than we were, so I'm very pleased we got something positive to build on.
Thank you, Simon. Andy, would you like to introduce this outturn report for us?
You're muted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. I guess what I would particularly like to add to what Simon has said relates to table 1. Clearly, it's great that our net expenditure was over £1.5 million better than we feared, but I would stress that is solely because our investment income overachieved. We had more cash, and particularly we had higher interest rates than we had budgeted for, and that's not a situation that's likely to continue. So if you then look at the surface expenditure column or row rather, we did overspend by 802,000, sorry, which is a worry. And I dare say you may have some questions when we move on to the report itself about individual items. Clearly, the thing to bear in mind, of course, is that inflation in service expenditure is very unlikely to ever go down unless we do hit a deflationary period, which is very, very rare. Whereas, interest income goes up and down according to current rates. So that is a pressure that we really need to think about. So I'm not at all relaxed about the situation, although for this particular year, 23-24, we did end up with a £1.5 million bonus, if you like, over and above what was expected. So we really need to keep our finger on the pulse for the future. But I'm happy to take any questions that people have got on specific items, and if I can't answer them, I'm sure Anna knows a little bit more of the detail than I do.
Thank you, Andy. Questions from the committee? Rob?
Yes, I sent an email about this, I think. Can you explain the contingency line to me? Because I didn't see any explanation in the report itself.
What page is this on, please?
This is table 1.
I believe that is entirely for the pay award, isn't it, Anna? But either Simon or Anna can confirm that.
I can pick that up. That's fine. Yes, it's mainly for the pay award, and we've just talked about the vacancy factor, so we have that held to cover the increase, the incremental, and the inflationary pay award. And it's also, there is an element of it sat in there for any other additional expenditure in year that we may not know about. So it just allows us to have the ability to make some in year decisions on expenditure that we wouldn't have necessarily budgeted for.
So the way the figures are presented was the 668. That's an income, is it? Or that's yeah.
So what it allows is the individual lines themselves to overspend, so that we've got an income budget that we can effectively move if we wanted to cover that expenditure. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. Thanks.
Can I add to that, Ron? So I think I'm right in saying this, that the managed vacancy factor, i.e. the expectation that you'll maybe only have 97% of posts filled at any, on average through the year, rather than trying to allocate that to individual cost centres within the service areas, would be much too complicated. So that is one of the items that goes into contingency. And in a year where your vacancy factor was less than we budgeted, say 97%, and it actually turned out to be, 98.5%, that would reduce the what's effectively a net income figure in the budget of contingency.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Are there more questions on the revenue elements of this while we're here? Which was table 1 essentially. There's some. Are there other questions that were sent to? Oh, sorry, Debbie, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I do. It's about paragraph 20 about the accruals for service charges at Abbey House. Is this the time to ask that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, I'm a layman, and what I'm reading here is that for years, we were billing tenants of Abbey House for service charges that actually weren't paid. Is that, and somehow we didn't catch on to that until now, and now we've made a giant sort of correction. Is that, am I interpreting that correctly?
Part of that is correct. So they have been paying service charges, but how service charges work is we do an estimation. So we'd estimated what that charge would be, but unfortunately we'd overestimated it because we hadn't really kind of got a grip of the total cost of running the building and the part that would be apportioned to the tenant. So we'd overbilled, and then we do a reconciliation at the end of a period. And it was on that reconciliation, when sort of evidencing those charges, that we realised that it was an over bill. So we've had to reverse that back out.
Right. So it's sort of like when the utilities company sets my direct debit for a certain amount. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And why did this go on for how long did it go on for? It says years.
No. Well, it says previous years, so that terminology means the previous year. So I think it stems back to 2023. I think when the original invoice was raised, and then as we've got into 23-24, we've done that reconciliation. And I think due to a few staffing issues and some vacancies across the teams, that reconciliation took a little bit longer than we would have expected. But it is all up to date now and fully reconciled.
So in the olden days, when I was last paying attention to overdue payments and invoices outstanding, was when the Revs and Bens manager checked and chased invoices that weren't paid and put pressure on the service departments to take care of business and that kind of thing. Does it still work that way now that the personnel have changed in Revs and Benefits? Is that still how it works? Is that the team that's responsible for chasing overdue invoices?
I'm going to hand that one to Simon, if it's okay.
Yeah, it's actually the Exchequer team that deals with that now. So it's the Exchequer and Procurement Manager, Ben Watson. But he's got overall control of it, but individual departments.
I didn't mean to mention names. That's all right. I didn't mean to mention people's names, but I was just trying to find out what's changed that this happened, and then what changed that this is not going to happen again or anywhere else.
Just in terms of this, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a debt issue. This is actually we've basically raised the wrong bills.
Yes, I get that
have been challenged. I think
it's like a pro forma invoice for way too much.
Yeah, and I think what we've, I mean, I've certainly seen quite a lot of correspondence on this involving members of the property team, and I think there's a lot of learning to be done about how, you know, the accounts are structured, make sure people can get information they need to run the right reports, to issue the right charges, and so on. There's possibly some tweaks we can do to the ledger in that area, which Anna's team can look at. This is about making sure we, even if different people are responsible for different parts of, you know, paying different bills in the building, we can get a common coding set up that, you know, we can identify all the costs associated with the building to do this. So it's clearly very unfortunate that we got to where we got to. I mean, I think the thing to say is, I think we haven't lost any money that we were due here. We've just overbilled and ended up having to.
It was just that the amount of income we expected turned out to be a little bit inflated, or quite a bit inflated in this circumstance.
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, one of the examples was for you know, another. Something had VAT on it was included in the recharge, and clearly we shouldn't have had VAT in the recharge. So I think there's some experience training, some systems set up, but rest assured it's on the radar for you know, making sure we don't get a repeat. We've already asked the question: is this likely to happen anywhere else? And you know, it's on the radar.
Okay. I just had one other small item, and that's
Andy Crawford come back in on that comment first before you ask your next question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, Chair, and yeah, it's a valid point, Debbie. This is, you know, £400,000 is what we're talking about, and that is half of the net expenditure overrun of the service departments, isn't it? And I was a little bit surprised when I saw this. I think it might be valuable, and it's your choice, of course, whether you ask for a little bit more detail on this. The report, yes, does say previous years, and if it is only 1 year, then I think we ought to be clear about that. But nonetheless, £400,000 is a very large amount of money, effectively, for us to have got wrong and not to have noticed at the time. And it, you know, with my former audit hat on, I would certainly think to myself, well, hang on, if we got it wrong with this one, by far our biggest tenant, can there be some confidence that we are definitely right with all the others as well, albeit that they might be smaller, and that the debtor control system that is now in the hands of Exchequer is doing what it needs to do to identify where we're raising invoices that end up being incorrect and take a fair time to resolve, which then impacts on our financials to this extent, where we have to. It's not an overrun of expenditure. No. It's an over-accrual of income that we've had to effectively reverse off.
Do you think that it might be something Victoria Dornan-Smith would want to look at?
No, I wasn't suggesting that we necessarily audit it, but although that's obviously your choice if you want to recommend it, but I would have thought a little bit more detail about the timing and how it happened across the various departments that have input to this. So basically, I guess it's property and Exchequer, to give you some comfort if that's what you choose to want to demonstrate that this has been resolved. It's a one-off. Won't happen again, and it isn't happening elsewhere, if you see what I mean.
I'd like to hear what my colleagues have to say about that as well.
Can I just come back on that? I mean, we have got someone in finance who's actually spending probably far more time than we would like in the context of what the finance work we'd like them to do, actually working with property on service charges and making sure they're reconciled. So I think there's a potential staffing need in the property department to also get involved in resolving this as well, because I think it is their responsibility. We're doing a lot of hand holding at the moment to make sure we don't get a repeat. So in that sense, I'm satisfied that we've got finance support to this process as it stands at the moment. But I think we do need a longer term solution, as I said, with training, with perhaps getting the ledger set up properly, getting staff in the service, you know, asking questions if they get stuck, understanding the rules, and I think that's how we'll avoid a repeat. I mean, clearly, if if we spot this going forward, then it's certainly, you know, a conversation to be had with internal audit. But I think at the moment, I think we've got staff deployed helping out here.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I think I suggest we come back to that bit in discussion at the end to work out what specifically we'd like to recommend. But thank you for being so candid on that particular issue, everybody. Oliver.
I referred to paragraph 21. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Crawford that £400,000 is a lot of money. And that, I seem to remember, is the deficit being produced by the Beacon, or at least so last year. So I was very pleased to see the extremely optimistic paragraph in number 21 about the improved performance, such that when it comes back to scrutiny, no doubt we can expect to see it making a contribution to the council's income. That was a comment. My question is actually a rather more general one. Obviously, this year's performance, as Councillor Crawford says, primarily because of the surplus on investment income, has been rather better than we anticipated. Now, this is a bit unfair, and I think we're running ahead of ourselves, but I remember looking at the medium-term financial projections sometime, I suspect, last year, which showed, albeit based on pretty conservative revenue projections, you know, a time coming when we were going to start running out of money and borrowing substantial amounts of money, etc. Does this, obviously the budget for this year, which has now been revised, was part of those rather pessimistic or not necessarily pessimistic, but worrying projections. Does this mean that the time when we would become really concerned about the financial position of the council is being pushed out further than when we saw that medium-term financial projections last year, or is it too early to say?
I'll try and answer that, and I can't remember whether the report's come to scrutiny. Maybe it hasn't, but we obviously do in-year budget monitoring. And we did it for the first, for the first 3 or 4 months of the year now. But that showed that we were almost spot on budget. Literally, it was maybe a £10,000 difference between budget and actual for the forecast for the year. So as things stand at the moment for this year, we're very close to the budget that was set. So obviously, I will be disappointed if we have this sort of adverse expenditure within the service areas this current year, based on what I've seen so far, compared with what we had last year.
Indeed, I think it was a slightly different question I was asking, though, Andy, which was more about what's happening in 4 or 5 years' time as this feeds in, and the improved performance because of the investment income. Does this lead us to make us be less pessimistic about the situation in 4 or 5 years' time, or not?
I don't think so, and there's lots of reasons to be pessimistic, Oliver. But not least of all, we don't know what the government funding is going to be, and various other things. I don't think this report, looking back to the year 23-24, necessarily makes us look more pessimistic. Maybe Simon's got a different view. Maybe he's more pessimistic than I am. I'm not sure.
It's a tricky one. I mean, I think that one of the interesting things, I think, for the last couple of years is inflation and interest rates have been a double-edged coin, haven't they? Some of the overspend will no doubt because we, you know, as inflation stayed higher for longer, as you know, rewind 12 months, you know, inflation probably stayed higher than everyone hoped. Interest rates stayed higher than everyone hoped, and that's led in part to the overspend and in part to the it being rescued by investment income. I think that the challenge for me going forward is I think that inflation's baked in. So, you know, when we set the budget for 24-25, a lot of the pressures that we were experiencing in 23-24 that led to that overspend had to be accommodated in the budget, and they could be accommodated in the budget because as much as we put the pressures up, we also are able to increase the budget for interest income. So they've balanced each other out. I think the challenge I've got is those pressures are there and are still in, but the interest income will fall away. And I think that's the challenge. I think in the short term, you know, the underspend has bumped up the reserves. So if we position ourselves as using reserves, that buys us a bit more time. But I think during the period of high interest and high inflation, they equal each other out. But we won't see our prices drop when inflation, inflation hasn't gone. Inflation isn't negative. Inflation has just reduced in speed, whereas our interest income will go down, whereas our costs won't.
No, I think that's fair, actually. I think what you're saying is that nothing's really changed in the underlying assumptions that you were making in terms of the medium-term prospects, but there's just been a one-off positive variance in terms of the amount of money sitting in the reserves because of this. So I suppose, going back to my original question, it does actually put off a little bit, perhaps, the time when Armageddon strikes, based on the projections and the use, as I say, pretty conservative projections. But it doesn't mean that it's actually postponed indefinitely.
That would be my take.
If I may add to that, I think there was a survey done, wasn't there, Simon, of councils across the country, and how many of them were expected to be solvent at the end of a 5-year period, and it was a significant number of people, number of councils who were expecting to have negative revenue reserves by the end of that. I think it was almost 50%, something like that. And obviously, there's we've seen a significant number of some quite large councils already having to go cap in hand to the government to keep them afloat.
I suppose we would hope that the logic of events is such that there'll be enough people going bankrupt before we go bankrupt. The government will have to do something about it and make sure that we don't. So,
I'm going to move us on now.
Yes, anyway, that was
Debbie, sorry, I cut you off before you asked your second question. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. This one's really simple. On page 69 and 70 is the Appendix 3, which is always interesting. The capital outturn report and all of the things carried forward into the next year. I was going to request that right-hand column that's called explanation of variances actually have an explanation in it to help members understand what's happening with those projects, especially the ones that have a large amount carried forward. I mean, it's an explanation to say that it's roll forward. I guess that's roll forward. That's the project, okay, or carried forward. But it would be useful to have as a documentation the reasons why it is being carried forward, didn't finish. So that would be a recommendation, Chair.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Thank you.
But just
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes, please, Anna. No, sorry, carry
on. Just to note that actually within the body of the report under paragraph 31, we do pull out some of the key areas of slippage. I absolutely appreciate that it's not in detail as per every line, but we have tried to pull out some of the larger areas of slippage and provide a little bit more of an explanation. But we absolutely can advance that and improve that.
Thank you, Anna. Appreciate that. Ron.
I seem to be on contingency this evening, but table 6, can you explain the capital contingency?
What paragraph is that?
Table 6.
Okay. Got it.
That's I'll try, and then you can correct me, Simon. How about that? So I think it's sensible for any council to have a capital contingency because something might go horribly wrong, with one of our buildings or particularly one of our buildings that requires us to make some quick decisions to fix those physical structural problems. If we didn't have a budget for it, we couldn't do the work without going through quite a long process of setting a budget and getting that approved. So that sits there as a bit of an insurance policy, I suppose, so that if there is a major problem, we can draw upon it relatively quickly. Is that right, Simon?
It is. It's absolutely right. Apart from the fact that that's the last year we had the budget in that format. So I just wanted to just advise that we had for a number of years that line in capital, so it sat there. Occasionally it got drawn on and rolled over, but for 2020, 24, 25 onwards, we've actually wrapped that up with a raft of other essential and minor works budgets to put in a sort of bigger annual minor works budget. The only reason I'm saying that is when we do this report in 12 months time, you'll say last year you said that. So I thought I'd just clarify that that is, Andy's absolutely right with the explanation for 23, 24, but we've just changed how we do it for future years.
So you won't be able to ask about that next year, Rob.
Right. One other question. We have to put in the budget for government reasons, the total for the decarbonisation, the total amount in the budget for this year, despite the fact we know we're not going to spend it this year. Is that the correct interpretation of what we're saying there?
That's my understanding, yes.
Where is it from?
This is development and corporate landlord. It's just below table 6.
Second bullet point.
Yes. They're spread over the decarbonisation project spread over 2 years, but the grant element of the budget was required to be committed first. Otherwise, budget would be lost in 2023, 2024. So that means the government really telling us we have to commit it in the budget, despite the fact we're not going to spend it.
That's my understanding.
I think it's possibly more nuanced than that. I think from, if memory serves right, to make sure we preserved what the government was going to pay us. I think we've probably reprofiled the project, so or changed the timing of the project to make sure that we got the work that the government would pay for in 23/4 done in 23/4, but that's impacted that's meant other slippage of bits of the work that we would have paid for that we might have done in 23/24 will be done in 24/25. So that's probably, I think, what that's what it's trying to say. So we've not lost any government money, but we've had to manage the scheme to make sure that we don't lose any government money.
The point surely was that it had to be committed.
Yeah, absolutely.
By a certain time, although the invoice that would be raised as a result of the commitment didn't need to be paid until subsequently.
I mean, it's one of the reasons that the variance is so large on development line.
Yeah.
I think possibly when we get the decarbonisation lessons learned report, hopefully we'll be able to go into that kind of thing a bit further. Judy, last question, and then we'll move on to discussion.
The last question I've got is on bullet point 11, and it's about the Garden Town and the Garden Village projects. They don't seem to be moving because those were pretty close to the amount that was left over last year. Is there a reason that they're just sitting there? Is it because neither project's going? I mean, Didcot Garden Town is rolling out, but I'm guessing that our spend at Didcot Garden Town doesn't really come on stream until Vale Park. And I'm not sure where Dalton Barracks are, but I'm guessing that that's kind of stopped at the moment because I don't think we've had any application in.
That's my understanding. Again, officers might know more.
I'm not sure we have the detail to answer those questions, do we, Anna?
No, I think the only thing I can say is that a lot of there's a lot of individual projects in this programme that are ongoing, but a significant amount of the spend I think is on our staffing. So whilst we're not seeing peaks in that expenditure, but as Simon says, we would need to go away and ask the team to provide some more detail behind that.
I'm just not quite sure how long we were allowed to sit on that money before it. I think it has an end date, but it might still be a long way away.
I don't think it does, but we can check that when we follow up with the team.
Yeah.
Judy, can I suggest you put that question in writing to Anna and Simon in an email, and then they can come back to you in writing?
Okay.
Would that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I think we're just being asked to note this report. Let me come back to what we're being asked to do. Apologies. Yes, we're recommended to note the overall outturn position of the council as well as the outturn of individual service areas. So I think we can do that. But we've in particular, I think we've had. Well, let me start with the easier one. A particular item we've been asked to kind of recommend is to explain variances. And Anna, you've very generously agreed to take that away. So if we can take that put that as one of our recommendations, please, or request that future versions of this report have more of an explanation of the variance where it says you can have one. That was easy enough. The trickier discussion we had was around this paragraph 20 on page 63. And I think there's a real concern among committee members that work needs to be done to prevent that situation with service charges reoccurring. And I would also note the cabinet members obviously concerned about this as well. So committee, is there anything specific that we would like to request, Julie?
Just going to raise that the amount that we're given there is 400,000. Total is 500. So that's 133,000 you've got on top of that one area. It does worry me particularly because as a trustee of a community centre, we've received a bill for this year for insurance, but also for all the years back to 2017. And there is a debate going on about whether that's a feasible thing to pay, whether you can backdate to that extent to a community facility.
That's not an isolated instance.
And I think that certainly there is 133,000 that's not been detailed. I think you might get quite a lot of pushback if that's all going to community facilities. And clearly it's an error on the part of the council for not having charged 2017 to 2018, 2018 to 2019, and to just get to 23, 24 and say, right, you owe us all this back money. So I think there's, besides the one that's actually detailed in this report, I think underneath that you have a whole host of other ones that come in your 133,000 that may actually cause you more trouble. So it's a real area of my concern.
Okay, so I think there's obviously in terms of that whole adverse variance then of slightly over £500,000. It's about service charges due from tenants, and I think there's obviously a real world impact of that on tenants is what Judy's saying. So that might be good in that actually we've charged them too much and we actually end up giving them back more money, but it also might be that we're obviously backdating things. So perhaps I could propose that we invite the cabinet member to really look much more closely at service charges with Simon, with your team, and you're obviously already looking at it. I think we can see that, and I do appreciate how open you've been in the conversation this evening about that. Do we want a specific report to come back to this committee about that year, or would we just invite the cabinet or recommend the cabinet member satisfies himself? What to committee?
Chair, it's Debbie.
Yes, Debbie.
Since it was the cabinet member who was suggesting that a report be requested, I think maybe a report should be requested on how it came about and how it was discovered, how it was rectified, and steps that have been taken to ensure it doesn't happen again. I'm frozen now.
Yeah. No, you're not, Debbie. We can still hear you. We can't see you, but we can still hear you. So thank you. Oh, Andy, did you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. I didn't recommend that you get a report. I said it was within your powers to do so.
In our powers to yeah.
Yes, apologies. Yes, that's what you said.
That's not just semantics. It's not. I guess it's not for me, partly because I feel it's not for me to tell you guys what to do because you're scrutiny. Clearly, if you feel strongly enough about it, then you could request it. And I was just reminding you of that. Was all.
But as I often say, Andy, one of my I remember distinctly in a local government association training on scrutiny, one of the very, very valid areas of our remit, is things that keep cabinet members awake at night, and it's certainly in the interest of open discussion and supporting you guys in your work. We're very receptive to suggestions, so thank you. So in that case then, I propose that in addition to all our minutes and the live recording of this, that we do ask for that to be looking into and a report to come back to us.
Do you need a seconder?
Well, I was going to say within 6 months, within 12 months.
Oh, surely shorter than that, because there's
3 months before the budget.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it should be a fairly easy report to do, actually. I think.
Can I just make a comment on it? So, yeah, I'm glad that you actually mentioned it, Judy, because I'd had this problem in my area as well, and I'd not put the two together. That was like, it's not just people who are using Abbey House; it's a wider problem. I think it's just to be clear about what we want the report to tell us. It's not just like, oh, here's the history and isn't that interesting to know. It's sort of, we need the lessons, don't we, that that's not going to happen again. I think that's the key point. It's all very interesting to find out how it happened, but only if it has I don't want to create work for people if we're not going to do something with it.
Well, I seriously think that if it's over a long period of time, I mean, that's the one I know about, over a long period of time. So that wasn't just over 1 year.
No.
I suspect, because I know the history, that a lot of this happened from 2016 onwards, because we outsourced. And when it came back in house,
well, the report will tell us what it is. But yes,
and so I suspect. Well, so what I'm saying is that there is information available that says this is a problem that could have been happening since 2016. And if it is just dealing with other community, but we have tenants that are.
I seriously think we would wait for the report, because it actually is happening before 2016 as well.
Oh, okay.
So I think what we're looking for then is, are we asking people to perhaps look back a decade?
Yeah.
So
I think we need to know what we're going to do about it, because we've identified a minus.
Yeah.
But depending on who's supposed to be paying the minus, that might be quite difficult to achieve.
I would suggest that we ask the cabinet member to perhaps look back a decade to understand what work has been done since discovering this issue. We appreciate that we've been open. So what work has been done or is being done, what lessons have been learned to ensure that these errors have been resolved, but also where there are real world impacts on tenant, how are tenants being looked after, how are they, particularly where we've made mistakes.
Because I don't know if there's a legal position.
But perhaps, Andy, I think perhaps maybe we could take this offline to establish what would be appropriate to look at, and perhaps Simon, we could be in discussion about that offline. But Andy,
Chair, yeah, I'm more than happy to do that, but I think there's a danger here of you mixing apples and pears up, actually. So to use Judy's example, if we had failed to invoice for 7 years, which is what she's suggesting, then that wouldn't have appeared as income anyway. So it wouldn't be part of the extra 133,000 that was referred to. That's likely to be something entirely different. So it's a different issue, isn't it? If we've not invoiced, then where we've invoiced and worked out that the amount that we've invoiced was wrong. So it might all be a function of a correlated problem or a similar sort of problem, but it won't explain the amount over and above the 398,000 relating to development and corporate landlord.
I think the 398 is actually a symptom of a slightly wider problem. This isn't just to do with finance department, it's property department or whatever is right. So the 398 is a very big number that's come out and hit us right in the eyes, obviously, and it's really important.
Yeah.
But I think what we're seeing is that's, as I say, a symptom of an underlying problem, which was possible mismanagement of collection of monies from tenants.
Yeah, and what you're asking me to do, or to solve that, it'll effectively be two pieces of work. I think maybe one is looking at the extent to which the additional monies were relating to invoicing of service charges, because it might have nothing to do with that. But also looking at how well we are working out what service charges there are and invoicing them in an appropriate and timely manner.
The problem is we won't know until we see the report, will we? So I mean, that's the time when we'll start asking questions.
But I think what Andy can do is they can during the process of this work, they can ask, is this a symptom of a bigger problem or is this an isolated issue? Okay. Simon.
Sorry, yes, I was just going to say, I mean, I think we just need to be very clear, I suppose, on, we will be looking at this from our perspective. So this is about, what process has meant to have happened and has gone wrong, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? I mean, I think it'd be wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to go into individual details, but I think this committee, with this committee's hat on, is looking at what has gone on with our processes and how do we resolve them. That said, having said all that, that also sounds like a JAG role, Joint Audit and Governance Committee role. So I think the suggestion of taking this online and having a ponder about what exactly the terms of reference should be and where it should go, I think is very valid. I mean, I think there's clearly a concern here. It's a concern that we share as well in terms of making sure we want to do the right thing. As I said earlier on, it's on the radar. So I'm actually probably more confident that we're probably not in a we're probably better off now and going forward, but I think we just need the comfort and assurance that that's the case, and probably to understand some of the implications of not being where we wanted to be previously. But I think we do need to remember it's from our perspective and just be clear on which committee is the right committee to look at it.
Okay, thank you, Simon. That's incredibly helpful. So I suggest then for the minutes and in terms of an action, we ask the cabinet member to work with the finance team to establish what happened in the situation that's outlined in paragraph 20 and whether it's a symptom of a large problem, but that we will, in order to establish the detail, and that we will take that offline and include Councillor Smith as chair of Joint Audit and Governance in case it's actually a JAG issue, and that we will then work out what's an appropriate timeline for that to come back and include it in our next work programme, an update in our next work programme in our next meeting. Would that be okay? I'm looking at you as the writer of the minutes.
Well, I just write the minutes. You say the word in. So.
Committee. Are we?
Yeah, that sounded good.
I mean, if everyone, if that seems like the right route, then that's
sounds good.
Okay, Simon and Andy, then let's be in touch.
Discuss.
Yeah, we'll just find out. Is everybody happy? I propose that's what we do.
Yeah, second that if necessary. I think we've done it to death now.
But I think it's really important that we particularly whether these are symptoms of larger problems or isolated. I think that's an important thing. Great. That kind of brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you ever so much, particularly for all of your work. Appreciate these difficult times and difficult processes and complicated. And thank you, Andy, for being clearly on top of the detail, which I think is really nice to see. So I call this meeting to a close. Thank you very much. If we could stop the live stream, please, that would be great.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Well, lost it.
Right, there we go. So you got a problem with somebody charging you back stuff as well, or?
Yes, one of the community thing that I'm involved